It's Monday, and that so happens to be the day that I like to talk about monsters. Hello, and welcome to Monster Mondays. I am Geoff Arbuckle, co-host of the podcast Film Seizure that you can catch each Wednesday at filmseizure.com or at a number of podcast providers online. Internet fame is a tough thing to deal with. Trust me, I get chased by girls all the time because of my internet fame. But if there's one thing to remember, is that the internet also never forgets. If you make a misstep, you say something that isn't quite the way you meant to say it, or if you simply say something that is not in line with a portion of your audience's belief, or if you just have a massive meltdown, flame out, crash out, whatever it is the kids are saying these days, you can find your tenuous time in the spotlight get nuked overnight. And that's kind of at the heart of this week's episode of Monster Mondays. 2022's Deadstream is about an internet personality who has had one of those flameouts, and we'll soon be meeting our protagonist, Sean, in just a moment. But Deadstream is the brainchild of married couple Vanessa and Joseph Winter, making their directorial debut. Joseph also stars as Sean in this very small, limited cast, but very clearly the Winters were inspired by works like Paranormal Activity and The Blair Witch Project. Found footage films were all the rage for a long time after the success of the latter of those two. And while the camcorder style of found footage was always the kind of like the preferred type of movies of this ilk, other films in the subgenre began to adopt other means of recording the spooky goings-on for various found footage horrors. Webcams, iPhones, they soon got into the mix. But with that, along came the idea of having the spookiness happen online. Host mixed webcams and online spooks through, Zoom calls, like VHS Viral, kept the idea of found footage on VHS tapes, only for those videos to be uploaded online and then go viral, as that title suggests. But Deadstream, much like with Ghostwatch, which I previously discussed on the show, goes for more of that live feel. And as kind of a side note, Ghostwatch could be kind of the unofficial sponsor for this entire month, as each movie here has something kind of similar to that movie's use of a broadcast of some sort. But Deadstream mixes the first-person / found footage style with more recent phenomenon of live streaming on platforms like Facebook, YouTube, and Twitch. And because of that, we now have something that can play into a little more lighthearted concepts. I mean, this is a comedy as much as it is a horror film, particularly very well split. The first half being very much a comedy, the second half being very much a horror film. But this is about a goofus trying to regain his internet fame after being disgraced and trying to get back on top. So let's see if Sean succeeds. Sean's internet existence is all about him being a massive scaredy cat and doing a bunch of stunts that get streamed live, like being stuffed in a garbage can and then being picked up by a garbage truck, dog sledding while wearing only underwear. There's one scene where we see him being driven around recklessly while in the trunk of a car, but we find out later that I think he's being smuggled across the border, but that's not given any context at the time that we see that clip. But he also is known for going up to two cops on the street and calling them douchebags, and then having to run away from them. These are the types of stunts that you see people like Logan and Jake Paul rise to fame online back in the 2010s. But wait, actually, is that what they became famous for? I don't know. I don't know, and I don't really care. My point is, there are a lot of internet personalities who do dumb stunts with some minimal risk of injury or illness or being arrested or whatever. And they're definitely quite annoying. Now, 6 months after being canceled for some sort of really bad stunt that we don't really know too much about at first, Sean is back and monetized once again. And he makes an announcement that his next live stream event will be October 20th and will be the biggest comeback since the first Easter. But he announces that all of the things he's done that he's scared of, the biggest fear he's always had that he's never confronted is of ghosts. He's going to stream in a famously haunted house called Death Manor, and he guarantees that his mere personality will piss off ghosts in the place and basically antagonize them. So that they come out and he has to confront them, I guess. But that leads to him stating that he's got a single rule that he must abide by. If he hears or sees anything unusual, he must check it out. If he fails to do so, he will not get paid by his sponsors. So it is up to his audience to point out weird things on the various cameras that he will set up and make sure that he follows that simple rule. Now, before going into Death Manor, Sean removes 2 spark plugs from his car and throws them into the surrounding shrubs to prevent easy exit from the grounds of the house. He also will eventually padlock the door of Death Manor and throw the key to the padlock into the vent underneath the floor. But he explains the Death Manor was built by a wealthy Mormon for his socially outcast poet daughter, Mildred Pratt. Mildred killed herself after her publisher and lover died suddenly. Later, people who lived in the house after Mildred also died under supposedly mysterious circumstances, ultimately leaving Death Manor abandoned. Now, inside the house, Sean finds all sorts of creepy stuff. He finds "Help Me" written on the walls with what he hopes is red paint and not blood. A lot of other occult symbols spray painted onto the walls and needles left behind by drug addicts. And he tells his audience that there are 3 rooms that will be investigated. First is the master bedroom. Supposedly the room is haunted by what's called the corner man, who just stands in the corner and whispers to inhabitants of the room. In the mid-90s, paranormal investigators took a picture of a ghostly figure in that north corner of that room. The second is the nursery. 5 children have died in that same room. I think he says it was 3 kids and 2 babies, maybe, or maybe that's backwards. I don't remember exactly. But in the late 90s, a young daughter of investigators claimed that children spoke to her in that room and told her that she was not to go in there. The third room, the bathroom, was where some EVPs were captured. The recordings caught voices saying "mama" and "pond water." Pond water was also something that the corner man had whispered to one of the men who killed himself after living in that house for a little bit. Now, after setting up the cameras around the premises, Sean sets up his home base in a room that, for whatever reason, has not had any reported paranormal activity. He takes a break, but is forced back into investigating by a restless audience sending messages threatening to leave the live stream. He talks about how Mildred seems to be collecting the souls of everyone who had died in the house to build the family that she would never have herself. And as Sean takes a leak in his safe room, the chat audience starts telling him that there is a ghost on one of the cameras walking around, and he tries to hide but has to follow the rules or he won't get paid by the sponsors if he does not investigate this. So the noises really start to unnerve Sean. They get louder. He has noises in front of him with doors moving on their own, footsteps running toward him. There's giggling that can be heard. He runs into the safe room only for a girl named Chrissy, who claims to have discovered where he was doing this live stream, has showed up to basically meet her favorite internet personality. After calming down from having the biggest scare of the night, Sean tells Chrissy that, he's leaving. She says, well, what about the sponsorship money? And he says, well, they can't pay him enough to stay. But she then says that he's hit a new all-time high in viewers for one of his live streams. So, that convinces him to stay now, because after all, he is really just attention seeking and after fame and making money off of dumb stunts. So as they now investigate the house together, they soon discover a secret cellar that has a bunch of Mildred's stuff, including a book of her poems that she wrote. Chrissy and Sean pull out a Ouija board, and Chrissy has him repeat something that sounds Latin that she says is some sort of peace offering to the spirits of the house. And as soon as they say that offering, more stuff starts to happen around the house. Chrissy starts to act strange, and when he says that he's going to go Google how to exorcise ghost children, she says that's not a good idea, and then ends up attacking him, trying to bite his neck. He uses a broken piece of wood to basically stab her in the throat, but after leaving the room and returning, her body has gone missing. And when he tries to leave the house, the body of Mildred's hanging corpse blocks his path to the stairway. Later, Sean gets a message from a viewer that he unknowingly destroyed a Hamza in the room that he called his safe room. It was a symbol that was used to ward off spirits of the house. Shortly after destroying that, the activity grew greater, and Chrissy showed up. Turns out that Chrissy was Mildred all along, trying to basically coax him into staying in the house. He learns from another viewer that the Latin incantation he spoke with Chrissy was not a peace offering to restless spirits, but something that basically gave control of Sean's will and soul to Mildred. And it seems that everyone who lived in the house previously was driven to the point of speaking those very words to some form of Mildred that led to them dying or killing themselves. Soon, his own viewers start turning on him and attacking him for whatever it was that landed him in trouble, having something to do with setting up a fight with a homeless guy, and end up that Sean beat him up so badly that he ended up being put into the hospital. And also how his apology video wasn't enough, and so on. Even talking about how he's a racist for some of the other stunts that he had done in the past. And they're basically pushing him, it seems, to hurt himself. But soon, Mildred reappears to chase him throughout the house. Sean is able to get outside and get to his car, but he has to find those spark plugs that he tossed into the shrubs. And he may be out of the house, but the noises and all the spooky stuff follow him, including some sort of hairy creature thing near where he threw his spark plugs. He's also approached by a police officer after being online, hoping for the police to come and get him out of the house. But it turns out that that's no police officer. It was one of those former residents that killed himself in the house. And he is actually, it turns out to be something of a ghoul that chases and tries to get to Sean while he is hiding in his car. But Sean finds something in Mildred's journal, which was that thing that had her poems in it that he found when he was with quote unquote Chrissy. He learns that Mildred wasn't trying to build a family. She was actually trying to build a following, something that Sean understands all too well. So he plans to do a spiritual copy strike on her power over him and the other spirits in the house. So he finds the ritual that she followed to gain her ability to manipulate people in the house and to hold the spirits there. His audience translates the Latin from the paper he found in the journal, and as he prepares to do the ritual, he apologizes for how many times he realized he crossed the line in his past videos, seemingly making amends for all the stuff that he did that was really pretty shady. Mildred then attacks Sean physically and mentally and chases him basically all throughout the house, and he figures out a way to capture Mildred to perform the ritual, stealing her power, but it doesn't quite work without a sacrifice of flesh. So after finding one of Mildred's fingers, he realizes that he needs to remove one of his fingers for that sacrifice. Mildred is seemingly destroyed and her spirit dragged to hell, and Sean survives the night. And as he thanks his audience for helping him survive, he's soon surrounded by the various demons and ghosts of the house before the stream suddenly cuts out. Well, let's talk about 3 things I like about this movie. First, I think Joseph Winter really does a great job of capturing the personality of these types of overly popular stunt and gag-centric streamers on YouTube and Twitch. There's a G. Willikers kind of personality that seems both painfully cringy, but also kind of obviously an act. In some of those internet personalities that that kind of have these, that talk kind of slow and kind of simple ways, seem to do it almost to attract younger audiences, which also makes it kind of additionally cringy on another level. But Winter is nailing this kind of personality. He's also quite funny too in satirizing these types of people, and it plays like a satire, like I said, or a parody, and not that cringy, obvious act that your Mr. Beast of the world or other streamers that have this broad age demographic spectrum have. What's kind of great is that he perfectly captures these types of guys who are really kind of talentless, but hit it big in the internet streaming boom of the 2010s. He overreacts to things. He says really kind of insensitive things, but doesn't really have any idea why what he says is insensitive. He's only talented at being a fame whore and collecting money for his sophomoric stunts. So again, this is a really good parody of those types of internet personalities. In addition, Melanie Stone is also really good as really the only other main character in this movie. When she shows up as Chrissy, she's kind of cute and attractive and seemingly somebody that you kind of want around. But then as Mildred, she also is scary, but also has some kind of funny things. At one point, she just as he's kind of looking over something in his lap, she pops up between his legs and bites him in the crotch. It's both scary, but also with a funny tinge to it. And that leads me to my next like. This is spooky season. I want vibes more than I want to be unnerved or truly scared. I tend to not watch the scariest movies or the movies that stick with me longer during this month. I want the fun spooks. And this is definitely a fun spook. This is, one of those things. I want haunted houses. I want ghost stories. I want slashers. But this has an extra element because there's comedy involved here. And there's a lot more to it than that. So allow me to try to explain. The first jump scare in the movie is really funny. While Sean's talking about the house, he screams and switches the camera view to what looks like just like a little stick man made out of wood planks with a bucket for a head. I mean, it gets a start out of you, but then you see what he's scared of and then you laugh at it. So yeah, what this comes down to is that the movie is very good at manipulating you into these scares. Beyond what I said about Joseph Winter playing this streamer almost expertly in terms of satire and parody, and making us laugh along the way, this movie is also manipulative in a way that these types of streamers are manipulative to their audiences. Video game streamers made an entire career out of playing horror video games and screaming and overreacting when scary things popped out. That manipulated their audiences into being on edge too and getting spooked out, getting spooked out in a way that maybe they wouldn't if they didn't have the commentary from the streamer. So this movie manipulates the audience into these jump scares because they're focused on the Sean character while something happens when we can't always see it, or we're, seeing things through his point of view, and his reaction is leading us to what we should be scared of. And Sean, even though he's really just kind of this talentless asshole on the internet, is someone we become invested in because he's portrayed in a funny way, and he is entirely our point of view into this movie. So all of this turns into kind of a multimedia ghost story. If you're a really good storyteller, you can sit around the campfire or a darkened room with your friends and spook them with a really good ghost story with chilling details. But a good storyteller can weave all sorts of other stuff into a story, including comedy. But the goal is to get people to go right up to the edge of their seats, and then you hit them with a scare. And this is accomplished by being able to invest in the guy telling the story. Now, this movie does a good job of giving you a character you can invest in, even if you really wouldn't like this guy in real life, and but also giving you the visuals while leading you by the nose and manipulating you into being spooked as well, which I think is also kind of funny because on a meta level, Mildred manipulates the people in this house to the point where she can then manipulate them in the spirit world by building that audience that hangs on her. And that's, I think all of that really works well for this movie. Thirdly, directors Vanessa and Joseph Winter claimed that the abandoned house they shot their movie in was indeed haunted. And yeah, the setting is rather spooky. Again, I wanted to cover movies I selected for this October based mostly on vibes. I wanted ghost stories. This can certainly fit that. I mean, granted, people often tell wild stories about old abandoned houses and whatnot, but according to the Winters, the local stories around this house were pretty wild and were pretty interesting. They also said members of the crew did not want to be in certain parts of the house alone. And while this may not be something directly in the movie that, that I'm selecting as one of my likes, it is something that kind of exists around this movie. Think about movies like The Blair Witch Project for a moment. There's an aura around that movie, aside from the movie trying to sell itself on the idea that these really were 3 documentarians who went missing in the woods. The woods themselves become something of a character just from all that stuff around it. And I kind of get that same feeling here with this admittedly spooky house because it is run down. It's a house that I would not go into if I was in the area. And it's something that, of course, people are going to build stories, and especially kids are going to tell stories about it. They're trying to spook their friends, trying to dare them to go up to the front door or open and look the door and look into it. Among the literal writings on the wall, the clearly decrepit shape the house is in, and the lack of any lights and all sorts of things that could create noises, this would naturally lead me to start feeling something more than what's there. So yeah, I like that Joseph and Vanessa Winter went out and found a house that is plausibly haunted and let that become something of a character in this movie. And in some ways, this horror comedy does a just as good of a job, if not maybe a little bit better of a job, because this is a better movie, of making this location something of a character than even Hell House LLC 2 did that I talked about last week. And that is all about the setting being a local legend and a character itself. But again, this is a better movie than that. So maybe, you get used to the setting, you become part of that setting, and that setting almost kind of becomes a character itself because you know where the various hauntings happen. That's all set up by Sean as he was going into the house. Anyway, that wraps up this week's Monster Mondays. You can catch new episodes of Monster Mondays each Monday afternoon at filmseizure.com. But don't forget to follow Film Seizure at Facebook, Threads, Instagram, and Blue Sky. You can also subscribe to Film Seizure to get both the Wednesday morning Film Seizure podcast and the Monday afternoon Monster Monday shows at your favorite podcast providers, as well as YouTube, where we also upload this stuff. And you can also check out my website, bmovieanima.com, to read new reviews every Friday morning. Next time, remember those old seasonal specials your local TV stations would have whenever a holiday was on the horizon? Weren't those kind of great? Well, let's hop into the time machine and set the controls to 1987 so we can tune in to the WNUF Halloween special. And until next week, stay spooky.